Welcome to Purpose 360. And today I have a guest, very, very special gentleman, Eric Bebernitz, and he's Director of External Relations for Action Against Hunger. And we're going to talk about some really critical issues about children and malnutrition and what is the state of hunger around the world, and then the exceptional capabilities of Action Against Hunger, a 45-year-old organization that recently won Fast Company's Most Innovative Company Award. And we're going to get into that in our conversation because the organization is just extraordinary. So we'll get into it, but welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here. And this is my favorite thing, being able to talk about the great work that Action Against Hunger does around the world. So this is a total pleasure to me.
And during these times, considering what our government did with USAID, we'll get into that and how you're managing around that, and that how you're fundraising, and it was built on a resilient platform. And it's helping you through these times. But it's also, we want our listeners to understand who you are, the depth of your capability, your innovations, your services, your products and such, so that they can say, you know, I want to support this organization. I want to work with them. I want to support them, whether you're an individual, whether you're a corporation or such. So that's my ulterior motive for this conversation. But I did have the opportunity to interview your CEO 4 years ago now. And so a lot has changed. So that's why the timing is right. And so we'll get into it. But first, your background. You are, I believe, of the over 200 guests I've ever had on the show, you seem to be made for this role in social impact. So you should really talk. Can you share with our listeners what, the type of work you've done in the past, and then why do you do the work that you do today?
Well, hey, thank you so much for the recognition. And, I guess the first thing to say is you don't get into it for the recognition. And this for me is, I think it started with my parents. But in terms of, my immediate professional history, I've spent my time largely operating in an international NGO space.
Right.
So working with the International Rescue Committee for a long time. I worked with the International Planned Parenthood Federation for a number of years. And then Earth Justice, which is US based, but I think its ambition and scope was global in terms of its programmatic impact, because it was focused on climate change. And climate change doesn't stop at the border of California. It keeps going. It impacts us all. So that's been my sort of professional trajectory over the last couple of decades. But what got me here is, this is a question I think I wonder about myself all the time. I would say broadly, my mother especially, but my father as well, there's a service orientation that my parents imparted on both me and my sister and the rest of us. My dad, his family, they were in the funeral home business. So they helped people at the hardest point in their lives in New York and Florida. And then my mother, unrelated, sort of coincidental, always a nurse, but was a hospice nurse for a long time before she retired. So there's always been that service orientation there. That's what we talk about over dinner, working with people that were struggling in different forms or another, struggling at the end of their life or to regroup at the death of a loved one. And that's impacted me in ways that I don't think I fully realized until I became, more of an adult. And then for me, it became, I think when I left graduate school, I didn't realize the depth of the industry, especially the INGO space. And that became clear to me when I joined IRC. And IRC at the time, and a lot of organizations say this, but we say we're the biggest organization you'd never heard of.
Well, I have.
It's a lot of us have, right?
Right,
once you know the space, IRC is a behemoth, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, a lot of just sort of the general population didn't know who IRC was or what they did or what their mission was. Once you scratch the surface, once you're into it, and once you see the impact that an organization like IRC has every day, whether it's mundane or really superlative, it's truly moving. And I was hooked. And from there, I thought, okay, how can I do this? How can I turn this into a real profession? And then on my side, how do I, galvanize resources for the mission? We live in the United States. The United States offers a lot for the world. One of the things that we're quite good at is building resources and bringing that to bear for the market and supporting in lots of novel ways globally. So, hey, all those things came together, brought me to Action Against Hunger, where I've been steering the external relations team for the past 5 years.
And those 5 years have been incredibly challenging. You know, first you had COVID, right?
Yeah.
And then you had Ukraine and Gaza, and then you have a new administration. And so let's just start with, what is the state of hunger in the world today? And then let's go from there into talk about the unique capabilities of Action Against Hunger.
Yeah, great question. Great way to establish who we are. You know, my immediate response is there's the past 5 years, which have been uniquely challenged, as you indicated. But if you take a step back and look at the wider trajectory of change, so over the past 30 to 40 years, the story is one that's less gloom and doom. And we've seen a marked decline in the number of most extreme cases of undernutrition, malnutrition, which Action Against Hunger is focused on solving, that humanity should be quite proud of, and we don't talk about enough. 60% reduction. We've been a part of that story along with World Food Program and other key agencies in our space. That's enormous change. But over the last 5 years plus, we've seen sort of a backslide, especially in key contexts like sub-Saharan Africa. I think about a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, the annual State of Food Insecurity report was issued, and Action Against Hunger has a unique point of view on that report. And what that report said to me was a couple things. One is the last 5 years have been challenging, and it's only getting worse in certain places in which we operate. At the same time, there has been some progress that's notable. Now, I say that with a little bit of hesitation because I don't want to impart this idea that the conclusion is going to be positive and inevitable. There's a lot of work that we need to do to bring parts of Africa to the level that we're seeing now in Latin America and Asia, where it's improved. We've got a lot of work to do. And Action Against Hunger is uniquely positioned to do that work. We have been for almost 50 years now. And we work in over 55 countries globally, the vast majority of which are in Africa, because that's where the state of food insecurity and hunger is the worst, frankly. And what we do and what's unique for us is that we go to some of the hardest to reach places. We're deeply ingrained with the community. And so that gives us access that others don't have. So whether it's conflict-ridden Ethiopia and Somalia, or parts of South Sudan and Sudan, along with all the superlative sort of humanitarian crises of our era that we've been participating in directly, whether that's Gaza, West Bank, Palestine, Lebanon, Ukraine, and places where there's been natural disasters. We've been there. That's what we do. Our DNA is humanitarian assistance. You know, I think for a lot of us in the sector, myself included, you want to be there to save lives. We'll always be there to save lives. That's our North Star. But we don't really want to be there to save lives. We want to be there to prevent that moment from ever happening again. And we want it to happen with the community's blessing and with them in the driver's seat. Because, you know, if we're really serious about achieving our vision of a world without hunger, it's not going to be with INGOs parachuting in and distributing food. It's going to be working alongside of communities to build capacity together. And to make sure that people are better prepared for when the worst happens. Because we often associate the worst with other parts of the world, but the United States isn't immune to this either. And we can see things happen unpredictably or predictably, depends on who you talk to. Like the flooding in Texas. No one really imagined that happening the way it did, but it's catastrophic and it affects the richest country on earth. We're all capable of experiencing a tough day. And so, you know, our job as an organization is to be there to help people where they need it the most. And then to, like I said, work alongside them to address the root causes that are driving hunger today.
Talk about the structure, because you have over 9,000 people, mostly on the ground And I think that the people really don't understand the breadth, the reach, the innovation. So talk. I want to allow you to really share and be proud of the very unique capabilities of action against hunger.
Oh, this is where the real work happens. We do important stuff in the United States to guide the technical expertise or advocate in Washington. But those 9,000 employees, the vast majority of them are from the countries in which they work or neighboring countries. We're not talking about an expat population. Overall, we say 95%, but in certain contexts, it's nearly 100%. It's the only way that we get things done. There are people that have been born and raised in a community and now are working on behalf of Action Against Hunger to support their brothers and sisters who are, in harm's way in that particular moment. It's the true shining star for Action Against Hunger's business model and allows us to operate in those 55 plus contexts. Now, that's not always going to be the case, especially with an earlier acute onset emergency like Ukraine. It takes a while to build local capacity. But we feel like we also offer technical expertise that's grounded in history and sort of those lessons learned from other communities that enable us to scale up quickly to deliver in ways that are effective in a local context. And this is where our technical expertise is something we're quite proud of and has really been a guiding light for the organization since its inception. And so when I imagine like what makes our work truly unique, it's the two levers, the humanitarianism, long-term development, root cause, addressing the root causes, but underpinning that on a deep and fundamental level is this commitment to innovation and change.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. You have tremendous amount of innovation.
It's incorporated in every single thing we do, right? From service delivery at the country level to, technical research and innovation at the global level to even my team with marketing and fundraising. We are driven by the different tools that help make us more effective. So that's a big part of what we do. Where the local, because this is the question is where the local is the most powerful is really around the moments that don't get a lot of attention. Right now, we hear a lot about Gaza, but where our teams are incredibly effective and the stories aren't broadcast as loudly are in places like Kenya. We've been operational in Kenya for a long time. Most of our staff are Kenyan or have lived in Kenya for a long time, close to the community. And so they knew in advance that certain areas in which we operate or adjacent to our operations were subject to flooding, catastrophic flooding.
Right.
So our teams were uniquely prepared as a result to help those impacted navigate the crisis right away. And that's the sort of, when we talk about answering for emergencies, everybody immediately thinks Ukraine and Gaza. But I think in any given year, we respond to 50 plus emergencies around the world. The vast majority are akin to what we experienced in Kenya. Flash flooding, catastrophic flooding, that, it does immediate damage, but then it might rob the soil of its nutrients. And so we have to work afterwards extra hard to rebuild some of the what people had built their livelihoods around in those areas. So that's where having local staff, it's not just a nice talking point. It's mission critical. It's
absolutely
how we get things done.
Yeah. So I want to go back to what is the origin story of Action Against Hunger?
Yeah, so we have a beautiful origin story. It was concerned citizens, scientists, intellectuals, public figures in France in the late 70s, appalled by what they saw happening and play out in Afghanistan. Catastrophic malnutrition among children. And they got together and said, we have to play a role as human beings who care in stopping this. And what are we going to do to stop this? And the story quickly becomes that story of innovation. So that group were able to galvanize support for the creation of the F100 formula. And in the 70s, how we treated malnutrition is very different than how we treat it now. It's always a medical intervention because it's an acute medical state. But in that instance, we had to put kids and family members in the hospital to administer the F100 formula. It's a milk-based formula. It's perishable. It needed to be handled with care. So we were part of the group that created that. And as a result, we're able to save thousands of lives in Afghanistan in the late 70s. And of course, the need didn't stop there. So that group saw, a need elsewhere around the world, and it quickly grew, right, to where we became arguably the largest organization with a singular focus on ending hunger globally. There's other organizations that might be larger than us that include hunger treatment within their sort of wider rubric, but we're the only ones who are fully focused. And that innovation carries on throughout. So instead of, treating malnutrition with F100 formula in a hospital bed, we're able now to, through new formulations that we've developed with the wider sector, bring it to people directly, or bring it in a more localized way, in a non-perishable way, through an RUTF, which is a ready-to-use therapeutic food. And it has powerful results. A course of treatment there can quite literally save a child's life.
Right.
And that's the story of Action Against Hunger. There's so much more in there. We've been on the ground for most of the big crises that the world has navigated over the years, or at least since the late 70s. And we'll continue to be there. That's our calling. And, we have our area of expertise. We know what we can offer. And we also increasingly have integrated that into a wider suite of services.
So we'll get into those. Yeah, we'll get to those in a minute. I want to just talk about RUTF because it's affectionately called Plumpy Nut.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about what's in it and why it's amazing? It's got a 2-year shelf life. And and if you look at videos of children before and after, it's extraordinary. Can you just talk a little? It's almost like the wonder food, but then you do other things besides that too.
Definitely, and I think this leads it's the story itself is a terrific segue into the new state of the humanitarian reality, because this work has been directly affected. Plumpy Nut is it's the brand name for a product based on a combination of like a milk product and a peanut paste. And for those who've never seen it before, it's akin to like a power bar. It's smooth in texture, and it comes in sort of a little sacket that you can administer and travel more rapidly and easily. So that is the innovation right there. Number one, it's fewer ingredients that are more shelf stable.
Exactly.
And we're able to, as a result, take it to the furthest reaches of Ethiopia when it's needed, or wherever else Action Against Hunger might be working. And this is usually done in concert with other organizations. So Action Against Hunger isn't a manufacturer. We are an implementer of the Plumpy Nut. So we'll work with, depending on the setting, local governments, the national governments, along with the manufacturers and UN agencies to make sure that the course is in the hands of who needs it the most. And so we like to say for $50, we can administer a course of Plumpy Nut to one child and bring them back from the brink. And when I say the brink, I mean quite literally they are on death's door, to really a place where they're on the path to a life thriving. And it's really a miracle, right? And it's something that we can get into the hands of mothers, tell the mothers how to use it, and then they can either do it in one of our settings that's managed by us, or take it with them and continue to administer. Now, what we're looking at currently is how do we innovate that further? How do we make it even more effective? We're looking at reduced dosages. Maybe folks don't need an entire packet. We use a portion of a packet and have it be just as effective. Maybe we can look at alternative ingredients and have those ingredients sourced locally. Right now, the two primary manufacturers in the United States are Adhesia in Rhode Island and Manna. They do their manufacturing in the United States for various reasons. Is it possible? Can we imagine a world where some of that manufacturing happens in Zambia? It's closer to where we need to distribute it, and made with products that are produced locally. So that's the ambition. Because it's a health administered product, so the WHO has guidelines that dictate how it's going to be used and will help validate it. So we've got to work through a set of research parameters to make sure that whatever we do next, in whatever form it takes, it's going to be recommended by the different bodies that oversee these things, and to ensure that the quality is there to continue the life-saving capabilities that it has.
So I want to get into what happened during the cutting off of USAID, but I want to go into the innovations that you're doing because, winning Fast Company's most innovative, company award, getting on that list is not easy. And I think it would be very surprising to our listeners and our viewers that you've created things like a GPS for goats. I mean, you're also on the agricultural side. You're not just about, dealing with malnutrition. So you've got an app that can detect whether a child is malnourished with, I guess, with the photo. And you've got your GPS for goats, which sounds really fascinating, and community run solar powered vending machines. Can you talk a little bit about all of these? Because no one with this is coming from an NGO. I mean, that's what makes you so special.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the GPS for goats is by far the most colorful example that
Sure.
when we talk about it, people really latch on because it's beautiful. What it does in its simplicity uses sort of satellite technology to help guide herders to the arable land or water points more effectively, especially in a drought situation. So we're able to look from the sky and get it to the people when the information that people need it, and then they drive their herds in the right direction. And that's the primary source of income and sustenance for certain communities. So
Sure.
it feels like a modest innovation, but it has a tremendous impact for communities that base their livelihoods around this form of agriculture. And then from there, really, you highlighted a couple of our some of our superlative hits, our greatest hits, right?
Your
Um,
greatest hits.
but there's
Important.
it's important work.
Yeah.
But the wider point here is that I think people often associate, I think, innovation with, especially now, AI, machine learning,
Hmm.
LLMs. For us, it takes on so many different forms. And you highlighted the agricultural use. So there's a
Right.
couple ways that it can help our work or help the wider sector. And it brings together sort of the public-private partnership side of the work that we do, that beautiful concentric circle between local governments, the private sector, and an implementer like us in ag. So we
Hmm.
know, and we agree with the Gates Foundation and others that are looking at this, that it's going to take deep integration of technology to bring some of these sustainable solutions to scale. So what does that mean? That can mean anything from next level seed technology, more drought resistant plants, GPS to guide the cultivation of fields, drones involved in some of the cultivation of fields, and then finding I think part of the green revolution was landing on specific crops, and sometimes
Hmm.
those specific crops like maize weren't suitable for the environments in which they were introduced. So how do we as an organization re-engineer things to bring in
Mm.
crops that are more suitable for the areas in which they're operating? And so one of the examples we have here of that work for us is in Zambia, and moving from maize and less drought resistant products to something like cowpeas, which is indigenous to the area.
Yeah.
And it's a good food to eat, but also can be brought to market globally to bring income into the community. So how do we take a concept like that and scale it? So that's what innovation means to action against hunger. It can take on so many different forms. And I want to dismiss AI, machine learning, and the role
Right.
of data engineering, because that plays a huge part increasingly in what we do. And the best way to sort of imagine this for everybody is around prevention. So how do we
Yeah.
look at modeling and large data sets to say, okay, this place is going to be prone to flooding. We need
Hmm.
to front load resources in this area in advance, or move people out of the area in advance to prevent the worst of a catastrophe happening. These are all, advancements in our sector within let's say generously, the past 10 years. But really it's taken, it's accelerated in the past few years as this technology becomes more accessible.
Yeah. Can you also explain the community run solar powered vending machine?
Yeah,
That
so
sounds
this is
fascinating.
it is amazing. As you look at the suite of interventions, and when I talk about sort of the basket of interventions, it's
Mm-hmm.
to prevent malnutrition and hunger. It's not just about sort of immediate food distribution or pumping
Mm-hmm.
out. It's also about water, and to prevent all the other effects that come with malnutrition or help offset them. We don't want children to end up with diarrhea or dysentery or waterborne
Right.
illnesses. So how do we do this? We build water points in parts of the world that wouldn't normally have them, and they're set up. We have a machine, the vending machine that you're referencing in Kenya, funded by private donors in the United States.
Great.
And how it works is, we give the community has access to tokens. It's located within the community,
Mm-hmm.
so it's more accessible than having to go out into the bush and find a new source of water, or one that might be more dangerous to access. So women and children can participate directly in securing water for the community. You take that token, you put it directly in the machine, and a portion of water, clean water, drinking water, comes out. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's so simple on a lot of levels, but it's really brings together all these different things. Like how do you bring technology to bear in some of the hardest to reach places? And then how do you give the community what they need? And it's been so successful that we want to build more, of course.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, the community is asking for more. So how do we do this?
Yeah, and how are they funded? I mean, can a partner come in and say, I want to fund a country of these devices, or 50, I don't know what they cost, but a certain amount over a certain amount of years? How does that work?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to tackle it. In this instance, it's funded by donors and UBS, the bank, who identified, working with our country programs, identified this unique need. And so they've given it off to our teams and some of our partners to develop the technology and then place it. And so, working with the same communities, we can identify new locations. And if there's people that are especially inspired by this type of intervention, we can find ways to fund it and make it happen. And the more we do this, the better off everybody's going to be for it. I don't have the exact price. We've said approximately $20,000 to $30,000 to set it up and run it annually. Which, when you think about the impact that has,
Right.
it's a relatively modest price point,
For sure.
especially for some within the private sector. That's very accessible.
And I love the innovative nature of it. It's really great. And I bet that when you create these, that it provides this positive energy and desire within your entire staff and field. Like, we're not just dealing with delivering Plumpy Nut, but we also have other ways that we're enhancing agriculture, clean water, et cetera. So it must give them a positive lift to balance out some of the more dire situations.
It's a beautiful story to be able to tell. And we've taken people from, our board members, our council members, to see it for themselves. Because you met Charles, Charles, our CEO, his mantra, once you see it, you're transformed. Your life is transformed. Because number one, I think the first thing that people from the West often realize in these contexts is just how extreme the situation is. There's hunger in the United States. There's undernutrition. We're not immune to this, but the scale at which it happens globally is hard to fathom until you see it yourself. And once you see it, and then you see an intervention like the vending machine that's distributing water, and you see how much hope and joy it brings to a community.
Right.
It's transformative. It's truly transformative.
And that's wonderful. Now I want to pivot to how you're dealing and addressing with the severance of USAID and the speed of it, and even, as many people have said, the cruelty of it. You've got a lot of resilience, but I'd love you to share how the 45 years, how the commitment to innovation, diversifying of partners and around the world has helped you, albeit it's not solved it.
Taking the long view here, I think, is helpful. So you're pointing to our legacy is important, because that shows that as an organization that's been around, we've navigated multiple challenges. At the end of the day, this is a loss of funding And we've been there before as an organization and a sector. What makes this unique is the volume of funding we're talking about for the entire sector. I think everybody at this point realizes that the U.S. government contributed an overwhelming portion of the development and humanitarian assistance that was being distributed by organizations like ours globally. And to have it disappear quite literally overnight under chaotic circumstances was a shock, to say the least. I think in reading about it and talking with colleagues in the sector, we've entered a new paradigm. And that's partly driven by the tactics of the U.S. government and the shift in priorities, the aggressive shift in priorities. But we're seeing the same dynamics play out globally, albeit not as severely or rapidly. So other principal funders in the humanitarian development space are cutting their funding for similar reasons. The Germans, the UK, the French, a lot of the key players in our space, their funding's going the other direction. And then what I don't think we talk about quite enough is the impact this is going to have on the UN system. The U.S. being one of the primary drivers of funding for the UN system, which includes UNICEF and World Food Program and UNHCR, the humanitarian agency. It's going to have a pretty serious ripple effect that we haven't quite seen yet. For us, Action Against Hunger, we're somewhat unique in that the U.S. government provided an important slice of our financial pie, but not the full. So other organizations had greater percentage of their resources coming from BHA and some of the other agencies within USAID or State Department. It was about 20% for us. We lost dozens of projects quite literally overnight. And I think one of the pieces of damage that was truly difficult for our sector was just the uncertainty around it all.
Yeah.
A lot of us read Project 2025 like we knew it was possible that USAID would be dismantled. But they're not the first one. That wasn't the first time to talk about moving USAID in a State Department, rethinking how we do foreign assistance and linking it up more intimately with our foreign policy. This has all come up before. So there was a little bit of like, oh, will this actually happen? And then it did. And it happened through what felt like an extremely chaotic situation. You can read about it everywhere at this point. What I'm concerned about now is how do we adapt? We have to assume, at least right now, that no meaningful funding will emerge out of State Department where all of this is housed now. It doesn't mean nothing, but we just can't expect it. So we have to find a more sustainable business model that doesn't rely on that source of funding. And what we've done almost immediately here within Action Against Hunger is we leaned into the other parts of our business that were more sustainable and allow us to continue with the innovation we've been talking about in the interventions in a humanitarian setting that are life-saving and absolutely essential for us to do. And a lot of that's going to be looking more closely at scaling our resources from the private sector in the United States. When you think about the long view of Action Against Hunger, we started in France. That's our base of operations. We're the second oldest office, but we're the second oldest office to tap U.S. funding. So we've never fully scaled with the U.S. market in mind. There's a lot of opportunity there for our organization. And because we're looking to fill a relatively modest gap, we feel like it's achievable. And we think that if we, sort of lean into our core first, like don't deviate from what we do best, and then also continue to pursue new innovations that'll be energizing for the American community, they'll see our effectiveness. And we'll be better positioned to lead in this sector for the longer term. That's our approach and strategy in a nutshell. I do want to go back to the sort of immediacy of what happened there. When projects are canceled, you sort of in the news hear about the worst. But what it meant for us in a practical level is that our ability to deliver services in Ethiopia stopped overnight.
Mm.
So individuals that were expecting to receive emergency nutrition, it wasn't there. We had to close doors. We had to lay off the staff involved. Cash stopped almost immediately. And that has an immediate life-saving impact. Not even thinking about sort of the soft
Right.
impacts of people seeing the U.S. government as playing an instrumental role in their communities. This is quite literally life or death. And I know that's been dismissed a little bit in some corners of sort of the internet or media space, but we've seen it. We've seen it happen. We've seen people that have been turned away, in our case, that are hungry or desperate.
Yeah.
And in other organizations' cases, it takes different forms, but it's immediate and profound.
Yeah. You have an advanced degree in folklore and storytelling, which is very helpful for this. I'm just curious, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer this, but when Secretary of State Marco Rubio said no one has died because of USAID, I mean, I think that created such a furor around people with just big hearts and the kind of work you do. How did Action Against Hunger answer that in some way to your current donors? I know that you've done some donor webinars and things like that and bringing people from the field. But how do you answer that? Which it's such a callous, I've heard things like, cruel and callous and things like that. How do you answer that?
Hey, so one of the challenges for Action Against Hunger is that we, by our very nature, are not a political operation. So we are aware of all these comments being made and have our unique perspective from on the ground that was telling us the exact opposite. But our feeling is to sort of let the politicians sort out the aftermath, because our job is to put our heads down and continue to deliver our services in the best way possible. That's our job. Now, when we hear comments like this, it's not helpful for bringing resources to the table or helping to communicate the narrative that we find impactful and important. If one of the chief architects of this project and implementers now within the State Department is saying the opposite of what we're saying, it's not helpful, right?
Yeah.
But it's really, we do our best to not enter into that political space, because we work with all forms of government all over the world, and it's our job and duty to deliver the services that we need to do that, to work in really challenging contexts. And that's oftentimes a challenging political context. And so I would put this, our political context in the United States, within that wider reality that we need to operate in. It's not dissimilar in some ways to what we see operating elsewhere in the world. And we have to be uniquely careful to ensure that, number one, our staff are safe, and number two, we're able to do the work that we need to do that we've committed to the communities to do.
So let's pivot to some other innovations. Recently, you've really focused on donor advised funds as an innovation to try and help raise more funds for the current situation. How's that going?
Hey, when we look at resources potentially available within the U.S. market especially, but increasingly so globally, donor advised funds are one of the natural places to start looking. It's a very increasingly easy way for donors to be philanthropic. So it's become very appealing as sort of a consumer-based mechanism for people to help contribute to the causes they care about. Now, what makes them unique and why we see innovation possible is that the rules governing them are a little looser than they would be for, say, a private foundation.
Yeah.
So the urgency to distribute funds is not quite there to the same degree. That doesn't mean that people don't push them themselves as the funders of donor advised funds and move it, but structurally there isn't the same incentives. So Action Against Hunger, along with all the other organizations that would benefit from sort of an evolution of this process, that's what we're looking at. And we see, the resources available through donor advised funds could be, and this is not an exaggeration, could be transformative for organizations like ours. And so we want to work with people that use them as a vehicle or the institutions like the Silicon Valley Foundation that
Yeah.
house robust amounts of funding because, Action Against Hunger is quite effective and great at what we do. We think we would be a great place for those donors to have a meaningful impact on some people's lives around the world.
And for those donors who are considering you use a lot of data to make decisions. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you've used data. It's very impressive.
Yeah, so there's so many ways that our approach to data impacts our work, from marketing. So how do we best tailor our approach to speak directly and bring our donors into the center of our work? Because we can't do this alone. The donors are the hero in this story, and we want everyone to know that a data-forward approach allows us to do that more effectively and efficiently on the marketing side and fundraising side. I think what people are going to be more moved by is the ways that data influences the work that we do globally. And, we talk a lot about innovation. What's guiding that innovation is unique and novel research. We have research teams globally that are, doing trials actively right now on ways to implement our work more effectively. And some of those are at a scale where the only way to truly analyze the information is through machine learning or AI. And so we'll take those learnings and then use them to influence and modify our approach to delivering services.
Yeah.
And I think that academic approach is really impressive and powerful because it shows that, number one, we're adaptive. Two, we're open to feedback and learning. If we're doing something that's not as effective in a certain community and the research is telling us to do something else, we're going to do that. We're going to listen to the research.
Smart.
And adapt.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps us effective. That's what helps us maintain the trust in the communities in which we operate. And it's what inspires our staff. How we attract some of the really impressive people that work for this organization, because within the circles in which we operate, it's known. Our technical expertise is known. It's valued, and people want to be part of that. So it has this wonderful knock-on effect once it's up and running.
That's beautiful and very, very smart. I'm also love to hear from you again, since you've got the folklore background. One or two stories. I mean, you've been with the organization for over 5 years. One or two that have just touched your heart so much that you like to share when people say, "Hey, Eric, what do you do?" And then you tell them what you do, and then they go, and then you try and elaborate on it.
One of the stories that came up for me, well, first of all, like folklore is interesting because it is a niche sort of research discipline, but the wider point around narratives and storytelling, all of us still tell stories. It's uniquely human, and we all tell stories that are resonate with the people that we want to communicate them to, whether it's our families, our kids, a wider audience like this, or one-on-one with donors. It's shaping everything, and it's shaping our understanding of the world. And folklore encompasses so much more than just the narrative storytelling arc. But what it does is help us tailor those stories that hook you, connect you, and then delight you. And one of those for me is we now have a pretty established partnership with IHG, Hotels and Resorts. And myself and the team went to Atlanta to work directly with that team to find out ways, to work together to activate that partnership. And in one of our calls with the team in Atlanta, we got back this wonderful piece of feedback, which was a person from one of their properties in Chicago contributed directly to Action Against Hunger and then told them, "I did this because Action Against Hunger was there for me when I needed it the most in the Balkans. And when Action Against Hunger helped them, now they're in the United States. Now they're working for a large prominent company and moved to give back." And you hear that, and that's the full circle. That's what you want. You want to be there when people need it the most. and then find out that it's not just an endless cycle of support, that it set them on a path that brought them to the United States, brought them to a large company, and then put them in a position where they could contribute back to us.
That's nice.
It was really a beautiful thing for me to hear. The rest, other stories, there's so many that you find. So I've been doing this for a long time, and one of our challenges within the sector is not becoming immune and callous to the imagery and the things that come your way, things that don't necessarily make it to the public. And you find ways to navigate it. Still, there are stories that break through and move you. I'm a parent now, and so I see the world in a different way, like every other person who has a kid. And we had a video that the team produced about, it was a young woman or girl in Somalia or Ethiopia. And the video came my way for approvals, and I was watching it with my wife. She was in the room at the same time. And we went through the story of, you hear a child crying. The child and its mother came into a feeding center in Ethiopia looking for support in their darkest moment. And the doctors and the community health workers in Ethiopia were able to administer, again, Plumpy Nut to a kid. And it's a story that we tell so many times here.
Yeah.
But in this particular telling, it was hard to watch. And it's a positive story. You watch this kid come in, you hear the crying. You hear the crying above all else in a quiet space. And it's unnerving. It moves you. It moves you as a parent. You imagine your child there. And through Action Against Hunger, she came through. She was revived, looked healthy. Her skin was clear. It was amazing to see. And this is all done in a cut up video, 1 minute long, effective story for us. But sometimes, I guess my point here is that it's those sort of mundane stories find a way to grab you sometimes. Mundane in the sense that Action Against Hunger sees these all the time. They had thousands of them all over the world all the time. But through effective storytelling, they break through. And they broke through for me for my own reasons. But they break through others too. We see our analytics and they really bring our work home to people that will never set foot in Ethiopia or Somalia or Uganda. So it's really, there's so many stories. There's so many amazing moments for the organization that move me. That one's to the core. The others, I mentioned Zambia before and the cowpeas. And we had the opportunity through my teammates to meet some of the farmers that were involved there on working to cultivate that new crop, and how excited people were for something to look forward to work on, to focus on, and to have not just Action Against Hunger support, but the wider support of their community to get a little bit of cash in their pocket and to help build from there. You could see the future, and you can see the future in someone's face that wasn't necessarily thinking about it before. When you're fighting for survival, it's hard to envision a future sometimes. But with these types of interventions that we do, it changes things. And so when you're able to bring it all together, meet the folks involved, and then see that should this be successful and go to scale, that it'll be not just one person, it'll be hundreds, if not thousands, eventually for us. Those are the stories that fuel me.
Beautiful. Thank you. What is the role of AI in terms of the type of work that you're doing and the future of alleviating malnutrition and helping with farming and also ultimately a lot of the challenges you have is because there's war, that's a long story, but what's the role of AI in the future of your work?
This is the big question that we're all wrestling with right now. My perspective on this is we need AI to help drive elements of our strategy.
Okay.
I think oftentimes it's talked about as an instrument, as an
Mm-hmm.
advanced form of Excel. Like you buy the license, it helps make your work more efficient, end of story. But what's remarkable in my mind about AI, machine learning, quantum is the transformative potential.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer for Action Against Hunger is what will that transformative potential be
Right.
that aligns with our strategy? And so we're figuring that out right now. There's lots of sort of smaller examples of where we've
Mm-hmm.
optimized our work. We have an internal AI based model that looks at our wash interventions globally and helps us position our water sanitation and hygiene work for new opportunities based on our current success. We've used it there. It fuels some of our marketing. But to me, this is sort of like nibbling at
Nibbling, right? Okay.
at the potential.
Yep.
There's so much more there. And what makes it both energizing and unnerving is that it's sort of evolving in real time. So we're
Mm-hmm.
like humanity and Action Against Hunger. All of us are trying to grapple with what this is going to mean for us as a sector, as people. Where is it going to
Right.
go? One of there's a quote, and I'm gonna abuse this quote, but the gist of it is it's David Graeber citing our propensity as humans to always find more work for ourselves. And one of the fears here with AI is that it'll make us all obsolete. One of my fears as a leader of the organization is de-skilling. I don't want to introduce AI and have who are previously highly skilled employees become
Mm.
over reliant on a tool in simplistic ways. So how do we avoid
Right.
de-skilling? How do we bring AI to the table in a way that will be productive for everybody involved? And then ultimately, how do we use AI or any advanced tool
Mm.
to drive our mission forward? I've worked with a lot of partners on this and had a lot of conversations related to this. And the key theme we always come back to is it's not a means to an end. It needs to help you bring
Mm-hmm.
your mission to bear. And so, I think for some of the low hanging fruit for AI and advanced technology is going to be around anticipatory action
Mm.
and how do we get better at predicting and our predictive models? How do we start to pull together the collective learnings around hunger and
Mm-hmm.
malnutrition to,
Yeah.
to build that next level? And I think the other core component is we can't do this from New York or DC or Paris. It has to be done at the community level, and it
Mm-hmm.
has to be deeply ingrained throughout the entire organization if this is going to be successful. So if we take those learnings and use that to advance our work in the wider sector and therefore humanity, my dream is for it to happen at the sort of country level. And
Mm.
so we're building up that next generation of
That's
data
great.
scientists who can take the technology and use it with all our collective learning over the years to improve the lives of themselves and their communities. And that's where I think AI has the potential to be, for our line of work, truly
Mm.
revolutionary. It's going to democratize tools and our way of working in a way that I don't even think we know yet
But yeah.
fully. I'm a folklorist. So what do I know? But
Yeah.
um, this is all just what I've read on my own
Yeah.
or been told. So that's the ways that our organization, in my view, are interacting with it now. No, we can talk about it again next year, and I'll probably have a different answer. So
I'll ask you next. I'll ask you next year.
yeah,
So, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I know that we have some of our listeners and viewers who say, "I want a job like Eric's. I want to get. I really, you're using all parts of your head, your heart, your hands, etc. You're deeply involved. What's your recommendation to a young person? They're getting their degree, you know, bachelor's or the community college, or they're working for NGOs, they haven't gotten a degree. What's the trajectory? What should they be focusing on?
that's a great question. For my role in particular, I might have one answer. For the sector, I would probably have another.
You could do
Um,
both.
for the sector, I'll start there. My advice to young folks or grads or those who are in a position to do this is to work internationally.
Mm,
Find a way
yeah,
to be there on the ground in a challenging context.
right.
Not to parachute in or sort of
Mhm.
be the passive onlooker,
Yeah,
to
but in
really
it.
to experience it, to see what it's like to build
Mm,
your capacity to be empathetic. It's important, and it's also important for if you're going to build your knowledge base from there. So the folks that I know from IRC or elsewhere have all been sort of deployed
mhm.
to work alongside communities in sometimes really extreme situations. I would say start there. For my line of work, there's so many different paths to get to where people probably want to go. Um, yeah, it's that's a hard one. I spent a lot of time working with the team. I feel quite um, committed to this career growth.
Mhm.
And when I think about what'll help our mission, there's, you can work within the organization to become the next director of external relations. And somebody guarantee will come in and do a better job than me. And that's the way it goes. And it'll be a beautiful thing to see. But what I often say to our junior staff in particular that come in is look elsewhere. Can you try within a foundation? Can you become a
Mhm.
program officer within a foundation and help allocate resources, not just Action Against Hunger, but to the wider sector to help make change? What about B Corps and sort of the CSR teams? There's different ways to
Ways to
sort
get
of
there. Yeah.
have an impact. And you can always come back to an Action Against Hunger with that expertise,
Right.
and we'll be there for it, or IRC or Save the Children. There's lots of organizations that do great work that people can engage in. But that's it. I find that my advice, especially early career, is just gain the experience in the way
Gain
that
it. Yeah.
resonates.
That's
Yeah,
what I say. Yeah. For sure. For
yeah,
sure. So I hate to wind this down, but we'll come back to you. We're going to bring you back because you're extraordinary. The organization as you are as well. What's the final word? I always like to give the mic over to my guest and something that we haven't covered or something you want to reiterate, as we have to end this wonderful conversation.
Hmm. I think we right now are uniquely focused. Humanity is uniquely focused. North Americans, people in New York on what's not working.
Hmm.
I hope that we've given examples here of what is working or what has the potential to work better, and that I want, in my own modest way, to find a different way of seeing the world
Mhm.
that's proactive, constructive, and more driven by hope, not sort of toxic levels of hope, but to see a path forward where anyone can play a direct role in improving, whether it's their neighborhood, community, or wider country, that it is possible. And that we work in contexts where it takes a modest investment to have a market improvement on people's lives. We see it all the time. We take it for granted. I want others to see that too. And I want people to see it in their community, whether it's Los Angeles, Chicago, or Nairobi, see that and then be inspired by it and work towards it. That's really the most meaningful thing for me right now, because we can go down a rabbit hole reading about the current administration
Mhm.
or whatever else might be stressing people out, whether it's
Right.
the state of the economy, the cost of food. There's lots of things that aren't working, but there are also an extraordinary volume of things that are working well and that we
Mm.
can continue to do better. And that if we're able to reorient a little bit throughout the day to focusing on those things, I think we'd all be in a better place.
That's wonderful. I mean, we need to have hope. We need to use our smarts. We need to be collaborative, co-create, and such, because there are solutions all around us. We just have to discover them, find them, apply them. So
Definitely.
thank you, Eric. Bebernitz. This has been an extraordinary, it's good as a conversations with Charles that we had 4 years ago. So in a whole different way. Thank you for all your great work and your commitment and the work that Action Against Hunger is doing. And we will definitely have you back. We want to hear. We'll give you some time. You can do some more of these great innovations, win some other awards. But thank you so much for joining us on Purpose 360.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the great work that you do to elevate similar thinkers and people doing great work. Very appreciative.